Welcome to my channel. English and Hebrew with Val. It's grammar time for level B1, B2. Today we are going to speak about passive voice. What is passive voice? So, it is when the object of the active verb becomes the subject of the passive sentences. For example, the active sentence, Mary makes lunch. Remake in passive voice. Lunch is made by Mary. So as you see, lunch is the object in this active sentence. And in the passive sentence lunch is the subject. The verb in the active is in present simple tense. The verb in the passive is the same in present simple tense but in passive form. When do we use the passive? We use the passive when we don't know who did the action or it's obvious from the context.
We were robbed yesterday. So, we don't know who robbed us. Cars are made in Germany. So, it is not important to know who makes the cars.
The car was repaired yesterday. It's obvious that a mechanic repaired the car. We also use the passive when the action is more important than the person who does it. For example, the house has been built so far. We usually use the passive in news headlines, news reports, newspaper articles, formal notices, instructions, advertisements, processes. As you see, this is news headline. It means money is being raised for a new medical center.
This is the newspaper article. As you see, the headline means Cameron is accused as troubled charity fails. This is the advertisement. McDonald's slogan is in the passive in present continuous tense. It's being loved. As you see, we use the passive in the instructions. Masks must be worn in the store. Here we use modal verb must and the passive form. So look at the formula of the passive verb. We use to be in the appropriate tense. And verb. If the verb regular we add ed. If the verb irregular we take the third form of the irregular verbs. Present simple passive. In affirmative sentences we use is, are, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use isn't, am not, aren't, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions, is, are, then subject, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, affirmative form. I am said. You are said. She is said. He is said. It is said. We are said. You are said. They are said. Negative form. I am not said. You aren't said. She isn't said. He isn't said. It isn't said. We aren't said. You aren't said. They aren't said. Interrogative form or questions. Am I said? Are you said? Is she said? Is he said? Is it said? Are we said? Are you said? Are they said? Past simple passive. In affirmative sentences we use was, were, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use wasn't, weren't, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions: was, were, then subject, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, affirmative form: I was said, you were said, she was said, he was said, it was said, we were said, you were said, they were said. Negative form: I wasn't said, you weren't said, she wasn't said, he wasn't said, it wasn't said, we weren't said, you weren't said, they weren't said. Interrogative form or questions: was I said? Were you said? Was she said? Was he said? Was it said? Were we said? Were you said? Were they said? Future simple passive. In affirmative sentences we use will, be, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use won't, be, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions: will, then subject, then, be, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, affirmative form: I will be said, you will be said, she will be said, he will be said, it will be said, we will be said, you will be said, they will be said. Negative form: I won't be said, you won't be said, she won't be said, he won't be said, it won't be said, we won't be said, you won't be said, they won't be said. Interrogative form or questions: will I be said? Will you be said? Will she be said? Will he be said? Will it be said? Will we be said? Will you be said? Will they be said? Present continuous passive. In affirmative sentences we use is, are, then, being, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use isn't, am not, aren't, then, being, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions: is, are, then subject, then, being, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, affirmative form: I am being said, you are being said, she is being said, he is being said, it is being said, we are being said, you are being said, they are being said. Negative form: I'm not being said, you aren't being said, she isn't being said, he isn't being said, it isn't being said, we aren't being said, you aren't being said, they aren't being said. Interrogative form or questions: am I being said? Are you being said? Is she being said? Is he being said? Is it being said? Are we being said? Are you being said? Are they being said? Past continuous passive. In affirmative sentences we use was, were, then, being, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of the irregular verbs. In negative sentences we use wasn't, weren't, then, being, plus the verb with the ending ed or. In the third form of the irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences we use was, were, then, the subject, then, being, plus the verb with the ending ed or. In the third form of the irregular verbs. For example, in affirmative sentences, I was being said. You were being said. She was being said. He was being said. It was being said. We were being said. You were being said. They were being said. In negative sentences, I wasn't being said. You weren't being said. She was not being said. He wasn't being said. It wasn't being said. We weren't being said. You weren't being said. They weren't being said. In questions. Was I being said? Were you being said? Was she being said? Was he being said? Was it being said? Were we being said? Were you being said? Were they being said? Present perfect passive. In affirmative sentences we use have, has, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use haven't, hasn't, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions, have, has, then subject, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, in affirmative sentences, I have been said. You have been said. She has been said. He has been said. It has been said. We have been said. You have been said. They have been said. In negative sentences, I haven't been said. You haven't been said. She hasn't been said. He hasn't been said. It hasn't been said. We haven't been said. You haven't been said. They haven't been said. In questions. Have I been said? Have you been said? Has she been said? Has he been said? Has it been said? Have we been said? Have you been said? Have they been said? Past perfect passive. In affirmative sentences we use had, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use hadn't, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions, had, then subject, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, in affirmative sentences, I had been said. You had been said. She had been said. He had been said. It had been said. We had been said. You had been said. They had been said. In negative sentences, I hadn't been said. You hadn't been said. She hadn't been said. He hadn't been said. It hadn't been said. We hadn't been said. You hadn't been said. They hadn't been said. In questions. Had I been said? Had you been said? Had she been said? Had he been said? Had it been said? Had we been said? Had you been said? Had they been said? Future perfect passive. In affirmative sentences we use will, then, have, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In negative sentence we use won't, then, have, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. In interrogative sentences, questions, will, then subject, then, have, then, been, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of irregular verbs. For example, in affirmative sentences, I will have been said, you'll have been said, she will have been said, he will have been said, it will have been said, we will have been said, you'll have been said, they'll have been said. In negative sentences, I won't have been said, you won't have been said, she won't have been said, he won't have been said, it won't have been said, we won't have been said, you won't have been said, they won't have been said. In questions, will I have been said? Will you have been said? Will she have been said? Will he have been said? Will it have been said? Will we have been said? Will you have been said? Will they have been said? Modal verbs with the passive form of the verb or the infinitive. In affirmative sentences we use modal verb, then, be, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of the irregular forms. In negative sentences we use modal verb, then, not, then, be, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of the irregular forms. In interrogative sentences we use modal verb, then, the subject, then, be, plus the verb with the ending ed or in the third form of the irregular forms. For example, in affirmative sentences, I can be said, you can be said, she can be said, he can be said, it can be said, we can be said, you can be said, they can be said. In negative sentences, I can't be said, you can't be said, she can't be said, he can't be said, it can't be said, we can't be said, you can't be said, they can't be said. In questions, can I be said? Can you be said? Can she be said? Can he be said? Can it be said? Can we be said? Can you be said? Can they be said? And now, I would like to tell you some secrets which are useful. Note 1. We use by with agent to say who or what carries out the action. For example, the cake was made by Mum. Mum is the agent. Note 2. We use with plus instrument or material or ingredient to say what the agent used. For example, the cake was made with honey. Honey is ingredient. Note 3. Don't forget to change the pronouns. Subject pronouns into object pronouns. Or object pronouns into subject pronouns. Subject pronouns I, you, she, he, it, we, you, they. Object pronouns. Me, you, her, him, it, us, you, them. For example, I read a book active. A book is read by me passive. Or, John gave me a lift active. I was given a lift by John passive. Note 4. We can use the verb get instead of the verb to be in everyday speech when we talk about things that happen by accident or unexpectedly. For example, my camera got stolen. Note 5. The verb let comes to be allowed in passive. For example, they don't let you to park here, it is in active. You aren't allowed to park here, it's in passive. Thanks for watching. Join my channel, English and Hebrew with Val, to know more. Bye. See